Welcome to The Beat. This is the podcast where we talk about all of the hot topics in policing. And we are here today with Desiree.
Hi,
If you want to introduce yourself.
I am Desiree. I am a student of Dr. Hall's. This is my second semester taking classes with her, and I'm really excited for what we have to talk about today.
Awesome. And then we are also here with Community Service Officer Jason Deary from St. Pete Police Department. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Lori Hall, and we're going to be talking on The Beat, which stands for Building Equity, Accountability, and Trust, with Jason and Desiree. Today, our topic is, what do police do? So
It's a very broad topic.
That's a hot topic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. For this podcast, we really wanted to create a space where we can have those conversations about what officers do, what they don't do, and bring in that law enforcement perspective so that we can really kind of get a better understanding of what law enforcement actually do. Because there's a whole lot behind the scenes, right?
Yep.
There's a whole
There
lot.
is.
Let's talk about it.
Okay. So basically, we all know that the job of law enforcement is to serve and protect, right? You know that from when you're little. But it's how agencies do that nationwide that can have a monumental impact on the citizens that they serve, right? And how you do that is you ensure you recruit some of the best people, right? If you can recruit the person, we can teach them to be good police officers. Right.
Yeah.
And that's really the goal, is to ensure you have good people in your agency. Then you can train them and provide them with the directions necessary to serve and protect and solve crimes and such, which we can get into in a little bit.
So when you talk about recruitment, what are those things that law enforcement officer or law enforcement agencies are doing to look for those individuals?
So basically, we have some recruiters that are coming on board with our agency right now. We're getting up to speed and online, and we will be sending them out across the country and far and wide to find the best people and bring them into our agency. You want a diverse group of people who have some reasonable life experience, right? A nice temperament, and people who are dependable and intelligent and are willing to work with people to help solve their problems. And we can do that in different ways, right? There's social media, right? You go out to different universities and colleges and visit and try and get people in, right? And you could do that maybe at graduations where there's a large amount of people.
So I know that there's a lot of variation with recruitment. When we talk about large departments, small departments, metropolitan departments, rural departments. And when we talk about like what you're looking at, you said temperament, right?
Yes.
How do we gauge temperament in terms of recruitment?
So that's a good question. There's different qualities that we look for. We want someone who presents themselves accordingly, right? You want someone who is able to engage with you when you talk to them, right? Have a nice conversation for 4 or 5 minutes and kind of gauge their ability to communicate either verbally, right? Or sometimes non-verbally. How do they stand? How do they approach you? Are they confident when they speak to you? Is there eye contact? Things that you're going to have to be able to develop and refine, right?
Yeah.
When you're working with the public and helping people through what can be sometimes stressful situations.
Yeah.
In regards to the baseline of temperament, when you have someone in the recruiting process and they become, let's say they're in our field training program, that's when you kind of really see who they are. They've passed the basics, right? The polygraph and the physical fitness and different things, right? In the background. But when you get them in to the agency and get them in a police car working and helping the public, that's when you find out, is this job for them or should they look elsewhere for employment?
And it seems like communication, I think, is one of the important things. So when you're working with them as a field training officer, how do you help them to engage better with the community and kind of develop those communication skills?
So that's an awesome question, okay? Because not all of us have refined communication skills going out into the workforce. We might be good students. We may be great with our friends and family. But sometimes if we're talking to strangers, in stressful situations, or sometimes in police work, there could be adversarial situations, right? How do we refine that skill set, that people person set? And you do that OJT, on the job training. Yep. So we will have a field training officer in the car with you, and we go to calls and we practice. We practice on the smaller calls first, right? Maybe just checking out with someone who could be in need of, say, services on the side of the road, right? Someone who could be having a bad day. You would check out with them and introduce yourself as the new officer and work on those communication skills, work on your confidence. And it's building blocks.
So going back, when we talk about recruitment, so temperament is one of the things that you're looking at, like how well these individuals can carry themselves and handle themselves. You're looking at communication skills, and it sounds like it's more of an informal kind of measure when you're looking at new individuals to become officers, and the way that you measure whether or not they have the proper temperament or communication skills. So you also are doing, you said, a background check. You're doing polygraph. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what does that background check look like? Is it something similar to like FBI, or is it a little different?
Yeah. So the background check is they want to make sure that uh, they're recruiting the person. We need good people in law enforcement. And if we can get a good person that is caring, that has the ability to develop skills where they need to be assertive at times and or show compassion at times, they need to have a well-rounded background and a skill set that we can mold them accordingly. So when they look at a background, maybe they're looking at your driving record. Do we need someone driving in an expensive police car that's owned by the city who has multiple speeding citations, parking violations, unpaid tolls, and things like that? Maybe not. Do we need someone who has been in a couple of, say, fights here and there at different bars? Are we looking at someone who maybe has an issue with alcohol if they're constantly getting in fights? Someone who's been arrested on different occasions for things. So although sometimes experience can help you become good in certain in field, it's those type of experiences are something we need to take a close look at and maybe move on to someone that has maybe more of a clean record. Yeah.
So is like one thing going to disqualify?
No.
So it's
No.
more of looking at patterns.
It's looking at a pattern.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if someone has if you were late for your an exam years ago and you got caught speeding, they're not going to hold that against you. If there was an argument with like a situation and you got into a physical altercation someplace and it was 15 years ago and you were able to explain it, if they can look at that and say, okay, we understand how that happened, there hasn't been anything since, they would consider you. It just can't be a pattern of behavior that could be problematic for you as an employee or the city.
So it sounds like you do take into account the ability for the person to reform and kind of correct their behavior, and you don't focus just on one or two maybe bad incidents that happened.
Correct. We do the same thing as police officers when we are working or dealing with the public, right? So there's a level of understanding and forgiveness, kind of moving on from the background of polygraph that we exhibit when we're working with the public too.
So it sounds like it's a really like a holistic process where you're looking at a lot of different variables, a lot of different factors, and there's not really like this hard and fast. It's, either you pass this criteria or you fail the whole thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
In regards to the polygraph, there are certain questions, and it's a certain time you're in the seat and you're answering questions. And if I'm not mistaken, you've got to pass all the questions, and that's determined by the polygrapher, right? I don't have a ton of information on that, but you gotta do well on the polygraph, right? That determines if you're being deceptive for the most part. Your background is okay, right? And if you're able to get hired, and then there's a field training program as well, where they assess a myriad of skill sets and brings you forward. Yeah.
Okay. I have to ask
Mhm.
because I get this question from students like every single semester, and it never fails. Like with drug use,
Mhm.
is it like a non-use policy, or are there exceptions? Like, or how does that look
If you're a police officer,
to become a police officer?
okay. So I don't know the exact number of times, but I'll give you an example. But don't hold me to the number. If you are applying to be a police officer, and let's say you're in your early to mid 20s, I mean, anyone can apply, right? and they ask you, hey, have you ever tried marijuana? And you indicate, I tried it 3 times in high school, just for an example, or I tried it a couple of times in college. I don't think that's going to prevent you from becoming a police officer. Anything beyond that, you might have some problems, but they're not going to hold limited use of trying marijuana against you to that extent. Again, I don't know the number of times, but as long as it's not excessive or abusive as determined by their criteria, it's possible they move forward with your consideration for employment for sure.
So I also have students that ask a lot, like, do I even have to disclose it? Right. What would be like the repercussions if they didn't?
Well, it's important. The truthfulness is important from the beginning. All right.
Right.
And it's important on the polygraph. They want to know that you're going to tell the truth, especially in uncomfortable situations. And it can be uncomfortable taking a polygraph, right? Even for good, honest people, it can be uncomfortable. The reason for that is when you're a police officer, you're going to be in uncomfortable situations. Also, there could be temptation, right? So if you're not truthful during the polygraph, how are you going to be truthful on the street when you recover a stolen car or you're impounding a car and there's $30 under the seat that's balled up, right? No one's going to know it's there. Well, yes, you know it's there, right? So we want honest people from the beginning, and that's the key. Your honesty has to carry through with you from start to finish.
So there's a narrative in social media and in the news and things like that there are dishonest cops, right? And they talk about, well, this incident happened where the cop planted this, or they took this, or they said I did this or that or whatever. Thinking about the recruitment process and how it's so extensive, and it's looking for these people that have good temperament, have good communication skills. They're people of integrity, right? And all of the work that cops, or not cops, but law enforcement agencies are doing to really recruit some of the best individuals. Like, how can those two narratives coexist?
You have to understand who wants to become a police officer, right? If you have someone that wants to be a police officer because they have a good heart, they have a nice temperament. There's maybe they have a courageous streak in them, right? Men and women who think, you know what, I want a little adventure in my life, and I think I can handle this. That type of personality is usually the one that they've had that for a while, right? So maybe they played competitive sports, or they swam or softball, whatever they did. Maybe they're in the military. So that streak, that positive streak that they have, that's something that they usually have for a while. It's not super common that we have someone who is, taking clothes from a local clothing store like a Target, and all of a sudden they want to be a police officer, right? Mm-hmm. So the personality usually stays with someone for a while. But also, we have an array of people at the agency who were either computer programmers, or they were pilots, or they worked in the medical field, or they were instructors, and they decided, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a police officer. We have a lot of those too. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it sounds like from your experience, you've been with St. Pete Police for how long? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Do I have to say? All right, I guess I will. So I've been with the police department for 26 years.
Okay. At St. Pete?
Yeah.
That's not that bad.
I hear a lot of good things from St. Pete, from all of the officers. And it seems like that St. Pete Police just really are not struggling with some of the things that are going on nationwide.
Correct.
And sometimes that can be difficult for people to hear, the public, because they feel like it's an outlier. They're like, I don't understand, I've had these experiences or that experiences, and it just doesn't line up and it doesn't make sense. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that St. Pete Police are doing that kind of insulate you all from those larger, issues and challenges in policing?
That's an awesome question. And here's how you insulate. It's about the people, and it's about your leadership. Okay. We talked about it earlier, recruiting the best person for the job. If you can recruit a good person who has the skill set that we need, right? You can teach them to be a good police officer, but you can't teach a mediocre person with a hot temper or lazy attitude to be a good police officer, because it's not there. We recruit the person first, then we can teach you to be a great police officer. And that's something that St. Pete Police has been very good at for a long time, is recruiting the person, good people, training good people, setting expectations, and ensuring that our officers as individuals and collectively meet and exceed those expectations consistently, like without falter. That
Yeah.
has to happen.
Right. I
So-
agree.
So what's the process for ensuring that they're continuing to meet the standards, like your follow-on training, and things like that?
So that's all. You guys have some good questions today. So the process to ensure that we are meeting and exceeding expectations on a regular basis, there's a formal process, where we have yearly evaluations, right? And that is it's like a 10 or 15 page process where we fill out, and it's
Fun times,
oh,
right?
multiple. Yeah, it's a huge, and we
The fun
grade
side of the
grade
job.
the officers and the sergeants throughout the year on everything from their appearance to how they qualify with their firearms, how they drive.
What about the individuals that don't meet expectations? What are the remediations that you have, or the accountability check systems that you
Yep.
have?
So that's also a good question. Let's say we have a squad of 7 people and a sergeant, and everyone's pulling their weight. But you notice that there's one officer who's consistently maybe late to the call, or they're late to read off, or their uniform's dirty, or the cruiser's dirty. What the sergeant would do is they would pull that person aside and talk to them first and identify the concern that either the sergeant noticed, or maybe a citizen brought it up, or his or her fellow zone partners would bring it up. Say, listen, this is what's going on with Officer Smith. The sergeant will pull them in and identify the issue. Say, listen, and offer a help or try and find out reason what's going on. But they would also set expectations to correct the issue. And the officer would leave the office. And if there's a correction to the issue or issues, the sergeant will call that person back in. Hey, thank you for adjusting this. Thank you for making an adjustment. We notice it and we appreciate you. If not, they're getting called in again. And from there can be, instead of an inquiry as to how you're doing, there can be a verbal direction provided. Hey, last time I talked to you, you said you would fix it. You didn't. This is what my expectations are now. If they're not met, or if you're not holding your weight, pulling your weight, we're going to put something on paper to help move you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's where that goes. St. Pete Police has a very low tolerance for poor performing officers. And that's not so much in arrest numbers, it's how we work and deal with the public. We mostly work with the public, but sometimes obviously you have to deal with people too, given the situations, So there's high expectations from our command staff on how we conduct ourselves as police officers.
Yeah, so it sounds like recruitment is kind of the key foundation to ensuring that you have a good police force and you have good officers. And there's a lot that goes into the way that we recruit law enforcement,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
It's not just fill out an application and go through an interview. It is a really intense look at who these individuals are, and you're really doing your diligence to find the best people that you can find.
It is
right?
rather extensive. Like I
Yeah.
said, we have a polygraph. They might talk to your neighbors. They check your driving record. There's quite an extensive process. And before they hire you, they'll come in as well, and they want to see what you're about and who you are. So there'll be a panel where they greet you and ask you some questions, and they want to see if you can talk to people. They're
Yeah.
looking for eye contact and how you carry yourself, things like that. So
Yeah.
it is quite a process, but it's necessary as well.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that the general public doesn't realize the extensiveness
Yep.
of this. I think we hear a lot, in social media, the news, things like that. Oh, they just hire anybody, or they'll take anybody, or, these are just high school graduates that are this or that. And so it's important that we understand that there's a lot of work that goes on in the background on how we go about recruiting and even hiring law enforcement to ensure that there are, these really good people of integrity.
Yep.
But you mentioned that leadership is extremely important, right?
That's very important. Yep.
Yeah. And so I'm sure with that comes the culture as well, having a good work culture and police culture within that agency. And that's why there's so much variability department to department,
Yep.
from city to state, from rural area to metropolitan. There's all of this variability, and we have these varying experiences with law enforcement because of that, right?
Yep.
So to move on a little bit, from recruitment on how we go about hiring officers and how officers come to be, right? And they go through the field training in the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about like a day to day, right?
Sure.
What does it look like? You know, you get on shift,
Yep. So
Then
that's
what?
that's a good question. You say day to day, but it might be night to night.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have day shift, right? That'll come in during the day, and then evenings that'll come in, 2 or 3 o'clock and work till midnight 1, and then you'll have the night shift. Depending on what squad or shift you're on, can determine what times you come in. So there's 3 different shifts. We have day shift, evening, and midnights. So your lunchtime might be someone else's 3 in the morning. That type of thing. You might be running and exercising on the treadmill when you get off work, but that could be at midnight or 2 in the morning. That's your 8 a.m. Right.
Mm.
So, but the day to day, what I like about this job is when you get in that car and you check into service, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't have a clue. The dispatch is going to give you your calls either over the radio or on our in-car computers, MDTs, and you're gonna go, and it's a surprise every time.
Tell them what an MDT is.
Mobile data terminal. It's
Okay.
a computer that's mounted between the front seat and the passenger seat of your cruiser. Most people wake up in the morning. They do whatever process they have. Maybe they'll check the news. Right, it used to be newspapers, but now it's social media. That's our newspaper, right? Both for local things that happened overnight, or regionally in the Florida area, or if there's significant patterns or issues that another agency nationwide experienced, that will also be that information will be on there. So picture like a newspaper, but for cops, and it changes
Newspaper
every
for
single
cops.
yeah, and it changes every day.
Well, I think it's important that you mentioned that it's not just local, it's also at the regional and national level,
Yep.
because the society's perception of something that happened across the country can also affect you at the local level just by being a police officer.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, without
Just
getting
a little bit.
Yeah, without getting
Tiny
into
bit.
it. You think so?
Yeah.
You know what? I like you. You're in tune, and that's something we also have to work on. And we can talk about that just for a second, so we don't ignore that. There are incidents that have happened throughout the country in different states, and some of them far away, that do have a ripple effect, right? So if something happens in Florida and it makes the news and it's ugly, involving the police, the officers in Boston are going to feel that. New Mexico, they're going to feel that. San Diego, they're going to feel that. Just like we felt things that happened, in up north a few years ago, and it's pretty heavy, and that's not lost on us, And so we try very hard, especially when incidents that we've experienced, nationwide have happened recently in the last couple of years. The officers try very hard to maintain and build that trust with the community as best we can. We definitely feel those things for sure.
I think you bring up a really good point. Something that you said when you started talking about what law enforcement do, what does that look like? That you said we don't always know what we're walking into.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the day brings, and contextualizing that in the national issues that occur and how it has this ripple effect. I think that it's important that we talk about the way that the public respond to law enforcement versus the way that law enforcement officers are responding. So you said we law enforcement don't know what we're getting into, right? So it creates this hypervigilance, right? That you have to have. You have to go into every situation expecting a myriad things happening, right? You never know, and you have to be prepared. And I think that the general public, individuals, they don't have the cognizance to understand that you're coming prepared for the best and the worst, right? And so they automatically are feeling as if you are at a heightened level, and it doesn't necessarily necessitate that because they have a full understanding of what's going on,
Yes.
right? They're in the moment. They know what has happened. They've known what's gone down. Yeah. They've got it all together, and you are the new guy and you have no idea, right? But then they also respond to law enforcement as if you did what happened in New York or Washington or whatever, right?
100%.
And so you have to balance that, right?
So you have to keep your emotions in check. So there were some significant incidents that we all know about that occurred several years ago, which that caused nationwide turmoil, right?
Mhm.
And that hurt a lot of people. But I felt that here. If
Yeah.
I would walk into certain restaurants, or especially just after that happened, I say that there's a few different incidents, but that you could feel that. Like if I would walk into certain restaurants down here, or just walking downtown, I would see people, they still have their COVID masks on, and I would see people look at me and they'd roll their eyes, or like they'd be upset that I was in their presence. Or if there's a local place where I like to eat, I would walk in and you'd see them talking to each other or whispering, or it'd be a feeling of disappointment that you're in their presence. And I felt that. We felt that, like, big time. But you can't allow that to affect the way you treat others, right? You have to maintain, and you mentioned it earlier, with the turmoil going on and everyone knows what's going on, being hypervigilant. Just because you encounter something that you perceive as negative, you can't respond to that. You have to maintain your cool. You have to maintain your composure, and understand that during those times recently, people will see things on social media or on the news, and they may get a large portion of it, but maybe they don't know the totality of circumstances, right? So, and as a law enforcement officer, you might have a similar perspective, or you might have a perspective that's a little different. And so if you experience those things, those negative things, and that ripple effect, you have to keep your chin up, and you still have to treat people the way that they need to be treated. And that's important, to keep your cool and not get down.
But I just have to say, like, that's hard.
As a human being, it is hard. It is hard. But as a representative of the police department and of all the people of all four corners of the city that you serve, that's your job. See, the uniform serves everybody, not Republicans, Democrats, not this. It serves everyone. And when you're in this uniform, you have to recognize that. That's very important. And you have to keep your calm and your wits about you at all times.
But you have to have a break.
So here's the thing. Different officers they do things for outlets, right? Some people get home and they want to run with their dogs. Some people like to they run outside, or whatever it is. We have officers that do the CrossFit thing, or they go cold plunge, whatever you do, you need an outlet to take care of some of those things, and recognize if you're having a bad week.
I think it's just a rough gig for law enforcement, though, because the general public, they have all of this judgment and this blame, and they cast all of this onto law enforcement, and they don't really, they struggle, I think, with seeing that law enforcement officers are human, right? And they make mistakes, they feel, they exist, they have their own needs, right? They have their own challenges. And I think that it's really, really hard for the public to see that, because they put law enforcement up there on this pedestal, and it's conditional. That
Isn't
pedestal
it? It
is
is
conditional,
Yeah,
right?
It can be.
It is so conditional. It's just so long as you're serving my need, right? You're okay. But the second that you do something to either me or someone I love, or even a group that I identify with, or if I just think you're wrong, then all of a sudden you're the worst of the worst, right? Like, you can't catch it, and you're all condemned.
That's the thing, is if there's an incident in another part of the country that's rather high profile, social media spreads that out, and all of a sudden we can take heat for that down here for something that happens in, say, Maine, or it doesn't matter. So you have to be aware of that, and just try and break those barriers down, just with a smile, or talking to people, or
it's just an unfair game.
But also, if you can't handle it, then maybe you shouldn't be a police officer. You have to be able to understand that not everyone is going to be super supportive, but that's not your responsibility to take that on. Your responsibility is to not project that back to them or anyone else throughout the shift or throughout your career. If you come across someone that doesn't love you, that's okay. That was 5 minutes ago. I'm moving forward.
Do y'all have conversations about that? Those kinds of things within, like, amongst yourselves or at like the agency level, or is it just like an understood?
So our agency is excellent at providing services for just about whatever the officers need. They're leaps and bounds above where they were even 10 years ago, because it necessitates it, right? But to answer your question, let's say myself and another officer are on a call, and someone just really doesn't like me. They're cursing me up and down. There's spit's coming out of their mouth, and they're cursing. They're making fun of me personally, or this or that, and you'll have my partner, who we can communicate a lot without saying words at all. Like if you two know each other real well, you can look. Oh man,
Nonverbal communication
nonverbal,
is
big time,
yeah.
big
It's very
time.
real.
And so if I'm getting it upside, one down the other, and from a citizen, and my partner is fine with that person, that my partner will give me a look like, all right, this person doesn't like you, and they'll try and segue over to them. Then when we leave the call, oh man, she really didn't like you at all. She was, so they turn it into humor, and then they tell everyone, and then everyone makes fun of me now, So the idea is you don't take that upon yourself. You can turn that into humor, obviously not in the presence of the person if they're having a bad day, but when you get back in the car, oh man, she called you this, and you laugh about it. Yeah, you have to. You can't take that upon yourself.
I think that's challenging though, because like for a large portion of the public, like they don't have the ability to do that.
So it takes practice. It takes practice. Like I said, it's been a tough profession the last few years, so it is constant practice, not taking those things up on yourself. It's you have to practice that. That's all I can tell you.
And how did those practices change? I know you said you've been working for the department for a long time.
Yeah, thank you.
So that obviously predated a lot of the social media hype.
Yep, 100%.
So how were your practices then, and how did they adapt to deal with the hype of social media?
Is it like easier or more difficult?
So here's the thing: is I don't follow a lot of social media accounts where you're going to see that stuff. So like my thing is humor and comedy. So any social media accounts I follow are comedy related or humor, things like that.
Who do you like? Like, who do you follow?
Right now, I like Nikki Glazer because she roasts people pretty solid.
Do you go to like any comedy shows anywhere?
So I have,
Yeah.
I've gone to the Improv. I've gone to Tampa, Orlando. There's different places for stand-up comedy. So
Yeah.
just make sure you don't sit in the front. Yeah, they'll pick you apart
For
for sure.
Have you
Yeah.
had that experience?
No, because I know better. Because
Okay.
I'm kind of a taller person, and once they hone in on you, you got problems. Yeah.
You're not going to make yourself a victim.
Yeah, no, not at all. But humor is actually a super important quality you need to have as a police officer.
Oh, for sure.
You cannot be super stern and serious all the time. It's not going to work out for you.
I think that's like one of the best qualities about anybody
Mhm.
is their ability to just find humor and I think joy
Yes.
in just about anything. Like you have to, especially in law enforcement, like you have to find joy in life or else it's really going to weigh on you.
So not only at the agency, but outside of work too.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother thing we can talk about. But so for me, I've always enjoyed just laughter and generally laughing. So I hung out with people from the agency who were always cracking jokes, not in front of citizens or the public, of course, but you need those outlets. And I will tell you, if there's anything this job provides, it's the opportunity to find things that are humorous.
I could imagine it's
Yes.
like probably the best Jerry Springer show ever.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, between times
You
of
see
need. But
some of the craziest stuff. I mean, you see some really horrible things, but
well, if you think about it, if humans are capable of it, if they can do it, there's only a couple of professions that are responding initially to that or helping them, right? You have firefighters, and you have police officers, right? And then when they get to the hospital, you'll have nurses and doctors and stuff. But on the street, in public, if people are capable of doing it, the first ones on scene are your ambulance drivers, right? Your EMTs, police and fire. So we deal with anything humanity is capable of or can throw at you. We are one of 3 entities that are always on scene, first or second.
I have to ask, what's your funniest call that you've been on?
Are you guys ready for this?
Yes.
You're not going to believe this.
Oh.
I'll try and shorten it, but it's something else. So I was a newer officer working in the city, midnight shift, and the new officers try and show the old timers that they're good and that they're capable. You know, just like typical guy stuff, right? Hey, I can accomplish this task, or I can chase this person, whatever it is, right? I can write good reports, or I'm good at investigating narcotics complaints. Whatever the issue, the guy or girl is looking to prove. They want to prove themselves to their coworkers, just like any of you want to prove yourself, right, with what you do. We did too. So there was a call of a in-progress burglary coming out. Someone looking in someone's window, thinking they were going to break in the house. So I was the primary unit dispatched, and we had a K-9 officer and like 6 or 7 other officers coming. And I took control of this call myself. And although I was new, I set a perimeter around the house, and I directed the officers in, and I wanted to show everyone that I knew what I was doing, you know. And we get there, and myself and another officer get out on foot, and the caller is hysterical, saying she can see 2 sets of eyes looking in her window behind a fence. I'm like, okay, I got this. You know, I'm gonna capture this guy. I'm gonna save the day, and I'm gonna tell the woman we got him, and this exciting deal here. And there was a kind of like an L in the fence, and myself and my partner walking around, and the woman's like, okay, I can see the officer because I'm taller. My head was kind of over the fence a little bit. She's like, okay, I can see the officer, and he's coming. The bad guy's right around the corner from where he is. And I'm like, man, this is it. I don't know what's gonna happen. Does he have a gun? Does he not have a gun? Am I gonna tackle him? Is he gonna tackle me? So I round the corner and I tell everyone I'm coming, and all of a sudden I am face to face. Now let me just tell you, I'm 6'7". For those of you who are listening, I'm 6'7". I'm a tall person. I am face to face with an emu.
That's great.
If you don't know what an emu is,
did you know immediately?
no, it's an ostrich. That's okay. This
Right,
lady
yeah.
in the southern portion of our city, there was a guy 3 houses down that had these 3 emus in his yard, and one of them had escaped. So the eyes she saw in the middle of the night in the darkness were large emu eyes looking in her window, and she didn't know that. So here I am. I have all the old timers. I have a canine ready to chase, you know, if I need it. Myself and my buddy, we look around the corner, and this emu looks at me eye to eye. And this thing, it hisses at me. And I'm like, ah! I scream. My buddy screams. He's running as fast as he can. I'm running away from this emu. And so this emu chases us for like 5 feet and then runs back to its yard, you know, where it was. And all these other officers, all you could hear on the radio was, oh my God. Like someone said that over the police radio, and dispatch is asking, are you okay? Everything 10-4? And they're like, yes. He's got a large bird chasing him. And dispatch didn't know what that meant.
Bird.
Yeah, dispatch had no idea what that meant. We thought it was a bad guy. And all the, all the senior guys are like, your first one, that's what you get, you know, way to go, new guy. You said you got us here for a bird. And sure enough, around that same time, the owner of the bird, this ostrich, came and grabbed it. It was gently, but it was her by the neck and brought her back to, guided this emu back to the house. And that was something that happened.
Do they still joke about it?
100%. 100%.
I would.
Yeah, 100%.
That's
I would be like, hey, I got a bird. I need help.
No, I got pictures of birds and photographs of birds and emus in my mailbox for a year after that.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would totally put together
Yeah.
like a photo album.
They did. They was in my cruiser. Someone would get little bird feathers out of the street and put in my mailbox. So I thought I was going to.
Make a bird necklace.
They did. It was
Feather
terrible.
necklace.
So that happened.
That's
That
great.
happened.
That's
yes,
hilarious.
that happened for real.
So you never know what you're going to go out on a call.
I thought I was going to, be this, big tough police officer and do the right thing on my training, and I got chased by a bird. A
And
big
how
one.
do you come down from that too? Because you get so like, you get hyper vigilant about that. Like you're gonna, chase
The
a bad guy. But how
adrenaline
do you
is
come down
pumping,
from that
you're ready to
adrenaline?
go.
So imagine that. I'm like, okay, this lady's saying that, okay, he's going to meet him right at the L of this fence. So I go around. I'm thinking it's a bad guy, because sometimes bad guys run, sometimes they fight, and sometimes they lay down. You don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
So I have in my mindset, and I'm trying to direct all the officers around the house in case he runs, it's covered. So you got to imagine what I was going through when I thought, okay, here we go. And I assumed he was a larger person because she could see him over the fence too. So I'm going after someone my size, and it was a giant emu. And it's like, how do you process that in a split second? And then it doesn't just stand there; it like runs after us.
Right.
So now it's like,
They're pretty fast. Too.
yeah. And they have these huge talons, and it was just, I could not live that down for like 2 years straight. It was funny, of course.
Good
but-
training.
Yeah.
That's
Good
great.
training.
And,
though.
yeah, so that happened. Yeah, that
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But that speaks to kind of like what we're talking about. Like you never know what kind of call you're going to
Yeah.
get. But you also mentioned something that I think is really important is, you're setting a perimeter and you're directing officers
Yep.
and you're doing this instantaneously in
Correct.
split seconds. You have to know how to make these decisions.
Yep.
You have to know what are the right decisions, but you're also having to ensure the safety of not only yourself, but all of the other officers and the public. Right? You
Yep.
have to be able to gauge what this individual may possibly do and what could happen in those situations, right? So how do you prepare for that?
Well, it's they can train you on how to do that, but at some point you're on your own, and you just have to practice. That was my main concern with that last topic is this poor woman is really scared, and then we do have real calls here and there where, or not real calls, but other calls where you'll get calls where someone's maybe it doesn't happen often in the city, but it's been my experience, and sometimes in the past where someone's trying a door handle. In someone's house, and there's a 13-year-old hiding in the bedroom, and they're saying they're calling mom or dad. Let's say came home from school, mom and dad are at work, and there's someone trying the door handle, and we get that call. It's like, oh my gosh! So there's a whole nother process there you're thinking about. You want to make sure you get there for this child, and you keep the child on the phone. And again, you set your perimeter, you call on your people, and you try and locate this person. So there's a lot to being
Right.
And then when you write the police report, you're writing a police report, especially if it's a significant incident that people are going to read maybe a year and a half down the line in court. Defense attorneys, civil attorneys are going to read it. Your police report has to be on point.
And you're going to read it, right?
I'm going to read it. Yeah,
if it's a year later and you have to go and testify.
And we have some great attorneys on both sides of the aisle, right? Defense and the prosecutors, and it's great to be able to work with them on each side. But also, if you're on the stand, kind of going off topic just a little bit, but if you're on the stand, they're going to ask you some pretty pointed questions, and you better have the answers. You look silly real quick.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you
Those
guys
reports.
train towards making sure that those reports are all inclusive, especially after something that is very emotionally heightened happens?
So that's a good question. Essentially, you're telling a story. When you write a police report, you're telling a story. It's like writing a book report, right? There are certain, you have your 1, 2, 3, ABC in each one. Just like if you were to write a book report, for whatever. I don't know if you guys don't call book reports anymore. That was in 7th grade, but essentially, let's say you're writing a paper, right? And you go to the beach, and your instructor wants a report on the beach. Well, I left this morning at 7 a.m. I stopped at Wawa, that type of thing. It's the same thing. Your report needs to be well written. It should be free of any spelling or grammatical errors. It should flow. It should contain all the proper information. Anyone reading that who wasn't there should be able to understand of exactly what occurred from start to finish. You're painting a picture, and that's what it is. You're painting a picture with words, and especially if there's a victim in the report, right? You have to do them justice too by writing a proper report so they can address any issues down the line with that. But yeah, we spend a lot of time on report writing in the police department, for sure.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And that's a good kind of segue into talking a little bit more about what you do. A lot of individuals go into law enforcement, or a lot of my experiences with students is they have this kind of vision and this idea about what law enforcement is, right? They're kicking in doors on every call and they're pulling their gun out and they're catching the bad guys
Yeah.
and they're doing all of this fun
High
stuff.
speed chases.
No.
Yeah, they're high speed chases,
Yeah.
right? Drug busts, all of this. But a lot of your time is really devoted to those reports and writing up, right?
Yep.
Law enforcement. And I think that it also it speaks to some of the things that the public critique about law enforcement. They see law enforcement officers sitting in their cruisers, right? And they're like, what are they doing?
Yep.
They're sitting there, right?
Right.
They're writing reports.
Writing reports. Yes.
Right.
Writing reports.
Yeah.
That's what you do. You're writing reports, and our chief, he really doesn't want us sitting in the cruisers a ton. Like if we're in the cruisers, like again, we pulled over from going call to call, but he wants us out of our cars as well. And he initiated the Park Walk and Talk program,
Right.
where he likes our officers to get out there every single day and sit either in 15 minutes, or if you have a little extra time, and go out and talk to people
Mm-hmm.
in the neighborhood in which you serve. Get out of the car, because you can drive by and wave at people, but if you get out of the car and start talking, it's so much more intimate, and you get information, right? And also they get to know you as a little more of a person, which can help you a lot down the line.
Builds the community relations.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, for
People
sure.
people come out, they gravitate to you.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's huge. So we do have that program. But normally if an officer's in their car and they're looking at their computer, they're typing reports.
Yeah.
Yep.
So law enforcement, they respond to calls for service.
Yep.
And there's a vast array of types of calls. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of calls you all respond to?
You may have a person down call first thing in the morning, where someone is not well medically, or maybe they're intoxicated and they're just laying on the sidewalk. And it's your job to go and determine what are we going to do with that. 99% of the time, it's someone who is in need of medical assistance. So you'll go to that one, to a traffic crash. And after that, you'll go to a late reported burglary where someone left their car unlocked and there was a gun in the center console. Now that's gone. So you have to get that report in real quick and notify people, because now you have a weapon on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, maybe you'll go to a credit card fraud at a local convenience store where someone used a stolen credit card to purchase $700 worth of items, right? So what do you do there? You have to pull tape. What credit card is it? I say pull tape. That's how old I am, right? So you have to get, that you can email that now, right, to our agency. But the video of that person using it, right? Did they touch anything in the store where you can pull DNA from that? You can swab that. If they put their hand up and they want a bag of chips, can you see on the video where they put their left hand? Can you get that swab to get their DNA to help strengthen your case? What credit card did they use? What number? And you run that. If you can, and find out, okay, well, this is a credit card that was stolen out of Plant City. So now you have to talk to Plant City Police Department. And these investigations keep unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. At some point, you'll get lunch. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And if it's busy and your fellow zone partners are busy, the officers won't even bother with lunch. They'll just eat on the go, because they don't want to stick it to their zone partners, And if you have a chance, you'll work on your traffic crash or that report. It's just anything that people are capable of is what you respond to.
And you'll get a call, right? And you'll work that call. You might not complete the report before you get something else.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to, let's say it's going to be a longer report. You can't stay on that and milk that report, because your zone partners now are getting call after call after call.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an art and a balance to getting those reports done. Now, if that's a significant report, like you said, with the gun being taken, you want to get that one done, or at least the shell of it, and let detectives know, let the chain of command know, your lieutenant or the watch commander, hey, we have a gun stolen. This is what it is. And and you enter that serial number and the best you can of the program. So if it's used or something happens later on that night, they're not asking, what was the report? Right. So depending on the nature and severity or importance of the report can sometimes depend on how soon you get that done.
Yeah. So you mentioned all of these different types of calls for service, whether it's, a traffic accident or credit card fraud or burglary. On average, in a shift, You said a shift's what, maybe like 10 hours?
Yeah, 8 or 10 hours.
8 or 10
Yeah.
hours. How many calls may you respond to?
So that's a good question. It depends if you work downtown and it's a really, it's a nice day out and things are moving along. You can maybe you'll go to 6 calls that day. Maybe you'll go to 10 or maybe more, right? But some other areas maybe a little bit less. It just depends on, like, if you have a lot of people concentrated in an area and a lot of foot traffic and vehicular traffic, naturally you're going to get more calls. But if I'm assigned out to, like, up by Whedon Island up there, or say far north, maybe you'll get less calls in certain neighborhoods because they're not super populated. So it depends on what's going on.
And do you normally have to finish these reports before your shift is over?
It's best you do that. Yeah, you might be able to hold, if it's a found pair of dirty sneakers, whatever it is, just for an example. You don't have to get everyone done, but it's best you get as many done before the close of the shift, because if you hold a couple of reports for the next day, that's when you're going to get it. That's when you're going to get 6 off the bat the next day.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so you don't want to get behind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just like anything else. It's like if you're a student and the teacher gives you, let's say you go to class 3 days a week, you don't want to hold all your assignments till Friday. Get them done as you go. Same thing with us. Yep.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about recruitment and how you become law enforcement officer, right? We talked about the things that law enforcement do, responding to calls for service, keeping up to date with their training. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the stigma that you deal with a little bit with the fluctuations in public perceptions?
Sure. So I feel that a lot of that is driven by different forms of social media or media. Now, police officers, you'll see them on occasion. We will do things that sometimes are not very smart, and we deserve it. Whatever we get, we deserve, right? But for the most part, depending on the manner in which the information is presented, can kind of shape someone's opinion, right, of what happened. So let's say there's an incident with myself and a student out here, right? And the incident lasts 14 minutes. And at the end of that contact, something happens. Hypothetically, let's say the student's intoxicated and they took a laptop. Not from this school, just from any school, just anywhere in the nation, right? And I ended up having to place this person into custody. I advise them, after 14 or 15 minutes of talking and determining, okay, we pulled a video, it's you took it, student's intoxicated, and we have to place them into custody for the theft, right? If I go to place them in the custody and they resist, well, at that point, I have 2 choices. I can try and physically control them and take them into custody, or I can just let them go. But he's got your $1,100 laptop. It's got all your whole semester stuff on it and all your family pictures and all your stuff. So if I go hands-on with this person and they resist, if it's passive, well, we can work with that to some degree. If it's aggressive and active to where they're punching, they're kicking, they're pulling away, well, then I have to meet that, right, to take them into custody. Not because I'm mad at them. It's not because I'm angry. It's because I have to take them into custody, right? So let's say that interaction, the last 60 seconds of a 14 or 15 minute investigation with this person, right, ends up being physical. And, it's my job to ensure I place them into custody, which means I have to win that, right? And so there's a tussle and I end up placing this person in handcuffs. If that's filmed by, say, 10 or 15 people, I'll ask you guys the question. When you open up your different social media platforms, do you think the entire investigation is going to be shown to everyone, or is it going to be the last 60 seconds of a cop fighting a student? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
definitely
The
the
very
last
Last 60
yeah.
seconds, right?
Yeah.
So and so that's what we're up against in law enforcement is, as I said, sometimes we do things that aren't very smart or that are wrong. Officers in general, right? I'm not saying me or anyone else, but officers in general, nationwide, you'll see something and think, man, why did you do that? We feel the same way, right? But to answer your question, I feel what we're facing is that information that we all want and need. Like, just give me the cliff notes. Just give me the last 60 seconds of what happens. And so what you'll see on different platforms, and I see it a lot, is you'll see the last 60 seconds of the interaction. And why'd the cop have to do that? It was only a computer. Well, it was your computer with all your stuff on it. You've been working on it. It's your thesis. You have, all this stuff, and you wanted this back. And it's $1,100, whatever it is, all these details, and we're investigating. We've shown this person took the laptop, and so for the last 60 seconds, it's a struggle. They're intoxicated or high, whatever it is. That's what you're going to see on social media. That's what you're going to see on the news, and then people are going to start texting. They're going to start posting. It's going to make the news, right?
And a lot of times, the general public, they don't really have a well thought out understanding of the role of law enforcement, right? They forget that in those moments. They just see, oh, this is wrong. No one should ever do this. Well, no single civilian human should do that. But we've given you a badge. We've given you authority. We've given you this role, right? And we've said, please do this, right? And then you do it and you're persecuted for it, right?
Yeah, a little bit. That's it. If you're not careful, you can start feeling that way. But that goes back to what we talked about earlier: is you can't allow that sense of social media persecution to come upon you and dictate how you treat people every single day.
And that's difficult, which, we talked a little bit about that. But what I think that is more damning for law enforcement is that while law enforcement might be able to, adopt that, right? And say, oh, this is happening and this is occurring and whatever, we're not going to take it personally, right? The sharing and the spreading of all of this information, without contextualization, without understanding, right?
100%.
It does damage to law enforcement everywhere, because then individuals adopt this purview, right? Of, well, that's how all cops are, right? They're all like this. They all break the rules. And so then we're met with hostile situations when, you're responding to a benign call for service, and these individuals are already at a heightened, hypervigilant state just because of the fact, well, they don't even want law enforcement there.
Yes.
And, like, you're dealing with this, with the advent of social media and all of this spreading, we don't really have a system that combats that, right? That combats, well, hold on, you've got to contextualize this. This was a 14-minute interaction. This was 14 minutes of protocol. This was even the last 67 seconds you saw. It was protocol, right? These are the protocols that we have in place, and these are the trainings, and this is the way that we've been informed. You're not informed about this, but you've tasked us to do this.
We battle that every day, is public perception, and there's different ways we try and enhance that by, for example, this coming out and talking to you guys is an excellent tool, an excellent vehicle for us to get our thoughts across, that, have interaction with you guys. And that's something it is a battle with the social media and people not understanding the full context of some things that happen that they see. And so the only thing I would ask is, when there's a hot topic or something that's, salacious, or really just it gets your mind going or blood boiling involving the police, is to, let's say it's a 15 or 30-second clip and just makes you really angry, or there's comments or this or that. Look at it and think to yourself, okay, what could have happened before this? Why did this happen? And if, any students listening, you could practice that a couple of times, right? Because I'm sure there'll be more on your, Instagram, Facebook, and all these other runs, right? Think, okay, what could have happened before that? Why did the cop do this? And when you start asking those questions to yourself, then it can open doors into more of an understanding.
I think that's a beautiful life lesson, like, just for any interaction, like, it could really just bring down like all of the disagreements and the conflict if we just kind of consider the perspective of another, right?
It takes maturity to do that, to consider other perspectives and thoughts and opinions and respect them, especially with, say, politics these days with Democrats and Republicans, and I'm not friends with you or your family or this and that. So for me, I'm lucky enough to where my disposition is, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If we have something in common, or you want to go to lunch, or we can share a laugh, I'm fine with that. I'm not excluding you from my circle of friends because we don't vote for the same person. That's not good. That's not
Right.
healthy.
I think people are struggled with this idea that we can coexist with our own beliefs or own ideas, right? Like we can really, you can believe or think what you think and believe what you believe, and I can do the same, and we can still talk.
Let me give you an example of what you just said. Okay. Let's say you have a campus event. One side is, just for example, one side's Democratic students and the other side is Republicans, right? You're going to have some pretty strong views, maybe people holding signs, people saying things about each other on the other side. Now, on each side, let's throw in a couple of hashtag groups that they're a part of, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to get into this real quick,
Yeah.
okay? The different hashtag groups that maybe you support that go beyond Democrat or Republican, social justice groups, or pro this or pro that groups, right? Which are super popular right now that's going on in our nation. So just visualize at this campus, you have one on one side, one on the other. I'll put that aside for a minute. We've all been to Disneyland, right? Disney World, okay? What do? You're at Disney in Orlando or California, all right, with people from all over the world, every possible different background, ethnicity, whatever preference, whatever you follow, whoever you're about, right? You go to Disney and you enjoy your day surrounded by thousands of people who are different than you, or a little bit, or a lot, or like you. When you ride rides, right, and your kids ride rides, you're laughing, you're having fun. Maybe some of you are screaming. You are enjoying your day, you're enjoying your life with people who are very different from you.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yep.
You don't think anything of it.
Right.
Okay, you all stand in line, you all pay extra money for those expensive chicken fingers, right? And this and that, right? But everyone enjoys until it gets hot and it's the end of the day. Everyone enjoys your day at the theme park
Mhm.
together. Yet, if I put all those same people back to this college campus, on one side Republican, one side Democrats, people are seething angry with each other. So why? Why is it that you can have a great time among strangers from this country, other countries, all around, different backgrounds and religions and beliefs, at a theme park all day together, no problem. But you give parameters to where you put yourself in a box, and now I don't like you and you don't like me.
I think that's a great point. It's that collective experience, right? And we get siloed whenever we start thinking about, well, I believe that or you believe that. And I think it's a tough job for law enforcement to kind of manage all of those things. So we talked about recruitment, the things that law enforcement do to ensure that they have the best people. We talked about what law enforcement do. There's so many different things, right? And we talked about public perception and managing the stigma. And so I think it's been a great conversation. I think that really kind of highlights, right, all of the things that law enforcement are doing. There's report writing, there's calls for service. There's just this immense amount of responsibility and immense amount of duties that we have. And we need to just take a moment to recognize all the things that law enforcement do for us, right? Because we ask them to, right? We forget law enforcement. We asked them to do this, and we believe that they can, right? And so we need to do what we talked about, right, is be able to take that perspective and understand that a little bit more. So thank you, Jason, for coming out and talking to us today. Desiree, it was great. Y'all have been listening to The Beat, and we'll see you next time.